mystic, prophet, seer of the future. Nostradamus, arguably the world's most famous astrologer. He is credited with forecasting some of the most dramatic and shocking events of the last 450 years.
It's extraordinary how people want Nostradamus to have been right.
Did this French prophet really see these major disasters? It's time for historians and astrologers to examine Nostradamus's calculations and attempt to decode his prophecies as we open the mystery files on Nostradamus. The beginning of a new millennium, and the September 11th catastrophe, reputedly predicted over 450 years ago.
Latitude 45, the sky shall burn. To great new city shall the fire draw nigh. With vehemence the flames shall spread and churn, when with the Normans they conclusions try.
Desperately seeking ways to make sense of this terrible act, it takes just a few days for people to connect the words of 16th century astrologer Nostradamus with the tragedy on 9/11/2001. Historian Ian Wilson has pieced together the story of Nostradamus's life and work.
What amazed me was how quick something like England's Daily Mail was in associating Nostradamus with having predicted the event.
The Twin Towers attack is a recent example of the writings of Michel Nostradamus being linked to modern events. This prolific astrologer drew up thousands of predictions. But his fame has endured because of this single book, Les Prophéties. Within it are 942 strange predictions, which, since their publication in 1555, have been attributed to many of history's major turning points.
In the case of World War II, his references to Hister were regarded as being references to Hitler. You can go back and Napoleon has been considered, the Great Fire of London has been considered.
Over the last 4 centuries, many people have believed that Nostradamus had foreseen such conflicts as the French Revolution and the great wars of the 20th century, and even details like the assassination of American President John F. Kennedy, and finally, a great apocalypse. But the true meaning of his prophecies remains elusive, almost as much as his own life story. Modern-day experts are now piecing together the facts and uncovering the secrets of Nostradamus's prophetic talents. He is born in 1503 in this small rural village, 1ο.wmv in southern France. He does not start his working life as an astrologer, but as an apothecary, traveling the countryside peddling his cures. It is only in his late 40s that he turns to a career in astrology. No one knows exactly why Nostradamus starts foretelling the future, but the skills for this new work would have been gained during his days as a student. In the 16th century, astrology is considered a precise science, with careful calculations required to reach the correct predictions. Such techniques need to be learned. Evidence of Nostradamus's training comes from the nearby University of historic Montpellier. This enrollment document reveals that one Michel de Nostradam from Remy signs up as a medical student in 1529. At this time, medicine and astrology are intrinsically linked.
It was before astronomical instruments had taken an understanding of the planets to a completely new and different dimension. So people really did still think that, you know, Mars or Venus might be influencing their everyday actions.
Monica Azzolini is an expert in Renaissance science and astrology.
Astrology was fundamental for astronomy, but even more so for medicine at the time. All continental universities would have had a professor teaching astrology as part of the medical curriculum.
During his studies, 26-year-old Nostradamus would have to learn about anatomical maps called zodiac men and how to compare them with astrological charts in order to calculate his medical treatments.
There is the practice of casting a chart at the moment the patient falls sick, and using this chart would help the physician provide a diagnosis and also a prognosis.
They believe that the workings of the body are influenced by the positions of the sun, moon, and planets.
The human body in the Renaissance is understood in a completely different way from the way we understand it today.
The moon, for example, is thought to affect the flow of blood around the body, like the tides in the oceans. It is a foolhardy physician who operates on a part of the anatomy over which the moon is aligned. It is believed that the patient will likely bleed to death. At Montpellier, Nostradamus would have received some of the best astrological training in France. But nearly 2 decades later, now living in Salon de Provence, he appears to be using these skills for a different purpose, that of foretelling the future. Peter Lemesurier has spent more than 10 years analyzing in depth Nostradamus's prophecies.
But we know he wrote at least 7,280 predictions, and most of those are in his almanacs.
The majority of Nostradamus's predictions come not from the Prophecies book, but from almanacs, booklets of predictions for the year which he publishes from 1550 until his death in 1566.
During his lifetime, Nostradamus was writing annual almanacs, sometimes 2 a year, sometimes 3. They were sold on the streets at the annual fairs.
It was quite a widespread industry for people to buy cheap predictions, along with basically what was their sort of calendar for the year.
These almanacs are designed for a mass market.
One has to bear in mind that Nostradamus was writing only about a century after the invention of printing with movable type. It was, if you like, the IT of the day, a new technology, and Nostradamus made full use of it.
To supplement his income, Nostradamus also draws up horoscopes for private clients, predicting the highs and lows of their personal lives.
Astrology in the early part of the Renaissance is very much an elite discipline, but increasingly becomes more common to have one's horoscope cast.
He had clients from every walk of life. He became a very wealthy man. He was on to a very nice little earner when it comes down to it.
These almanacs and horoscopes are not only important as a source of income, they make Nostradamus famous.
There can be no doubt that Nostradamus, in his own lifetime, achieved a huge reputation, not only with his own country of France, but overseas.
This shows the high level of belief in his powers of prediction. In the 16th century, people are trying to understand the world around them.
Everybody assumed that the end of the world was nigh because disease and famine and death and war, they were all over Europe.
The prevailing sentiment in the Renaissance was a mix of fear and belief. So the only thing that could save you from fear was belief.
Nostradamus not only recognizes this need, but takes full advantage of it. In time, he becomes known by the highest powers in France.
He put in one or two intriguing predictions. He says the king needs to watch for it this year, and that, of course, is what caused him to be called to the royal court.
Having entered the circles of high society, he becomes a favorite of many royals, including Catherine de' Medici, Queen of France, and her husband, King Henry II.
King Henry II of France consulted Nostradamus's almanac each day.
Nostradamus's high level of credibility becomes clear when, in 1559, Henry dies in a freak jousting accident after a splinter goes into his eye.
The country disintegrated into chaos. And that is just the kind of meat and drink to people and prophets of doom like Nostradamus.
Though Nostradamus does not predict the details of the event, popular belief in his skills is so great that Henry's widow, Catherine de' Medici, turns to him for reassurance of a happier future. Such is her confidence in his abilities that she even comes here to a chateau in his hometown to see the prophet. And Catherine is not Nostradamus's only royal fan.
Crowned heads consulted him because if a prince was born, they wanted to know what future that young prince might have. And then ordinary people consulted him. People wanted to know how long they would live, whether they would inherit a fortune.
When Prince Rudolf becomes next in line to rule the vast Holy Roman Empire, which covers most of Central Europe, it is Nostradamus who is called to draw up his horoscope. However, the story becomes more complex. There are others who, during Nostradamus's lifetime, fundamentally question his talent. Nostradamus is not the only astrologer in 16th century France. There is some serious competition in the prophetic market.
One diarist speaks of Paris, which had a population of about 200,000, that there were 30,000 people practicing astrology. Now, I don't believe that figure, but I think that does give you an indication that astrologers were a strong profession at that time.
His astrological rivals are far more critical of Nostradamus than his royal patrons, as the archives of the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris reveal.
You show yourself to be so ignorant that it is impossible to find anyone to whom you are second in ignorance.
It is certain you have no idea how to calculate by the sky, nor by any table.
Don't you see how much the language of this vile driveler is inane? How can you support this man who mocks you with his self-confidence?
He certainly attracted some vicious comments from fellow astrologers.
They accuse Nostradamus of bad practice in drawing up his predictions. There is one obvious root cause of this criticism.
You can attribute this to a lot of jealousy. These people, resented Nostradamus's fame. They would try and criticize him any way they could.
But there is also some historical evidence to suggest their complaints could have foundation. Historians have discovered that Nostradamus may not have completed his earlier medical and astrological training at Montpellier University.
There is preserved a record of Nostradamus's registration as a medical student, followed almost immediately by striking out.
This second registration document appears to show that Nostradamus is expelled from the school. His name is struck off the student list with a note in the margin citing his earlier profession as an apothecary or quack as the reason. At the time, apothecaries, deemed a lesser profession, are often barred from becoming physicians. There is also further evidence to indicate he leaves his course early.
In 1533, Nostradamus is recorded as a physician in Agen, and that shows he certainly wasn't continuing his work at Montpellier.
The medical degree takes 9 years to complete.